Oh, you wanted to talk to me? Yes, I did. Well, I'm here. Okay, so as you know, I just recently came out about a few months ago. I did know that you were not at all subtle. And since it's my first ever Pride, as an out and proud queer person, I wanted to do something special. Ooh! So like, you probably know, but the 28th of June is the anniversary of Stonewall. The anniversary of the start of Stonewall. Stonewall was a multi-day event. Yeah, right. Well, anyway, since miraculously every queer person in town is fully vaccinated, I wanted to throw a pride party! You know, since I don't really know the community that well, and I'm also a bit of a party planning nerd. That's a thing people are nerdy about? It's a thing I'm nerdy about. I would be delighted to attend your pride party, baby gay. I know almost every queer person within a 50-mile radius, so I'll be happy to help spread the word. Great, now, the thing I really need your help with is your taste. My taste? I thought I knew what gay people liked because I'm gay, but apparently I don't. I mean, I thought the Target Pride collection was really cute, but everyone I saw online said they thought it was ugly. Yeah, it takes a while before your third queer eye opens and you can just suddenly understand aesthetics to a level cishet people can't even begin to comprehend. Exactly, so I really wanted the input of someone who's been gay longer than me. Ah, you've come to the right person. Right, so my party has a bit of a queer history theme going on. Thought it could be fun to blend education with entertainment. Sounds great. So, to commemorate Stonewall specifically and the fact that Marsha P Johnson threw the first brick... Hold up. What? You think Marsha P Johnson threw the first brick at Stonewall? Is that wrong? Yes. What? Marsha P Johnson didn't get to the Stonewall riot until after it had already started. Who told you that? Marsha P Johnson in an interview about Stonewall. But the guy on TikTok said, well, the guy on TikTok was wrong. The truth is no one threw the first brick at Stonewall. No one threw any bricks. But it was a riot against the police. Yeah, and plenty of stuff was thrown, but just think about it. Where would there be a pile of loose bricks on the streets of downtown New York? I mean, Stonewall wasn't located in the nicest part of town, but there were just not stray bricks laying around for throwing. People threw shoes, glasses, purses, normal rocks, but this idealized history of someone chucking a single brick that launched an entire riot is just false. So if Marsha P Johnson didn't throw the first brick, why is she so well known amongst queer people? Why is Marsha P Johnson so well known? Did she do other stuff? Did she do other stuff? Marsha P Johnson did so much for gay liberation as well as being huge in the art and performance scene. Oh? Alright, for starters, the reason we even consider Stonewall the beginning of gay rights was because directly after Stonewall was the creation of the gay liberation movement, which is the group responsible for starting the majority of modern LGBTQ activism in the Western world. And of course, Marsha P Johnson was one of its founding members. Interesting. But not only was she a leader for the Gay Liberation Front, but her and Sylvia Rivera, another prominent trans woman of color in terms of queer activism, started the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, aka STAR, which provided housing to homeless LGBT youth and sex workers in New York City. So Marsha P Johnson didn't throw the first brick literally, but metaphorically she threw the first brick in terms of queer activism organizations? Sure, and of course on top of all of that activism, she was also a drag performer and even modeled for Andy Warhol. Who's Andy Warhol? What? I just came out a few months ago. Okay, but like, even straight people know who Andy Warhol is. He's a very famous artist. Well, I've never seen a TikTok about him. Do you get all of your queer history from TikTok? Yes, I do, because not everyone has the time nor mental capability to sit down and read a bunch of books like you do. I don't read books. Then how do you know so much? All of that information I just gave you was found with a few quick Google searches and cross-referencing different sources to determine what was fully accurate. Really? Yeah, I know queer history can seem like a daunting thing to learn because of how much it's been ignored and suppressed by historians and academics over the years, but in this modern era, there are now countless queer historians working non-stop to try and build an accurate and complete narrative of queer history. But the farther back you go, the harder it'll be for this new generation of queer academics to find concrete information, but Stonewall was only 50 years ago, and in terms of human history, that's pretty recent. I mean, I guess. We still have living human beings who were at Stonewall to tell the story and give us a primary source information on what went down. And guess what? Not a single one of them said Marsha P. Johnson threw the first brick. But what they do tell us is how people were singing and dancing in the faces of riot gear police officers, and how those nights of rebellion led to the creation of some of the most important queer activist groups in history. So if we have eyewitnesses still with us, how did the story of Marsha throwing the first brick even start? Well, here's where we get to the issues surrounding queer history. Because historians have really only just begun to really properly dive into our history within the past decade or so, queer people are desperate to have some sort of understanding about our history, and the easiest way to do that is to construct a simple and concise narrative that did include a true event and a real person, just misrepresenting how the actual relationship the two had. I see. Not to mention, racism and transphobia are not an uncommon thing to find in queer spaces, mostly spaces occupied by cis gay white men. So, constructing this narrative that all of queer liberation was started by a single trans woman of color is a pretty easy way to maybe get some cis white gays to stop being so racist and transphobic all the time. When you think about it, it's actually kind of harmful that the way that we're trying to undo so much of the racism and transphobia in the gay community is just by saying trans women of color fought for your rights, so you shouldn't be a bigot, rather than just saying the much more obvious statement of just, don't be a bigot. Oh my god, you're so right. I mean, why do we have to put trans women of color on a pedestal in order for cis white gay men to stop being assholes towards them? Yeah, they shouldn't need a reason not to be racist or transphobic, besides the reason that trans people and people of color are just also human beings who are deserving of respect. Yes! A group of people shouldn't have to be directly beneficial to your human rights in order for you to not be discriminatory. Even if trans women of color did absolutely nothing for queer liberation, we should still be supporting and loving towards them because they are not only members of our community, but they're just also human beings co-inhabiting this giant rock we all live on. Yeah, all of us should be united together. And I mean, another problem with this telling cis white gays that they owe all of their rights to a trans woman of color is that we don't even know for 100% certainty that Marsha P. Johnson was even a trans woman. Wait, what? Johnson self-identified herself as a drag queen, but keep in mind, the term transgender wasn't really in usage during the 70s and 80s, and the term transsexual was really only reserved for folks who had undergone medical transition, which was obviously still in its infancy. Now, it is highly likely that if Marsha P. Johnson was still alive today, she would maybe consider herself a trans woman, but also keep in mind she died in 1992, meaning she would have also never had access to any of the other trans labels that we have today. Maybe she would have identified as non-binary or gender fluid. It is a safe bet to assume, given today's language, she would have identified as a trans woman, but we honestly have zero way of knowing this for 1000% absolute certainty. We really don't know what any trans people of the past would have identified with if they were still alive today. Exactly. Now we have so many wonderful labels for people to take comfort in and to describe the unique and complex gender experiences of trans people. We can't be sure that every single binary trans person that we know of in history was truly a binary trans person or a non-binary trans person who just simply didn't have the right language yet. So we can't even have a complete archive of history's non-binary individuals because so many of them just didn't have access to that label. Queer historians are trying their best to try and determine which modern labels fit which historical figures, but a hole that will probably never be filled in terms of understanding queer people of the past is that good chunk of human history that everyone had to identify within the gender binary and within the heterosexual-homosexual binary, and it's really hard to determine from historical records who would have identified otherwise given the option. That's why it's really hard to find any bisexual or pansexual figures from history, because we don't know who was gay and just also participating in straight relationships out of societal obligation, or who was bi or pan and participated in both gay and straight relationships because they were genuinely attracted to multiple genders. And we'll never know. We'll never know how many queer people actually existed throughout history, and we'll never even know all the different kinds of queer people either. Yeah, I mean, the main reason cishet people are so confused by non-binary people and how so many people are identifying as bisexual nowadays is mostly because this is the first time in all of human history in which not only are queer people widely accepted, but there's also so many terms to describe people's relationships with gender and sexuality. And most likely, had this acceptance in language existed for humans throughout history, there probably would have been the same amount of people outside this gender and sexuality binary. It's just right now is the first time where it's not only okay for people to come out, but there's also so many options on what to come out as. There's probably so many people throughout human history who would have totally identified as pansexual or genderqueer or as a demi-boy or demi-girl or would have used neo-pronouns or xenogenders. It's just that those people didn't have those options for identity. So now that those options exist for the first time, it seems like all of a sudden there's this influx of new genders and sexualities, when in reality, it's just people finally giving themselves labels that they feel comfortable with instead of just forcing themselves into existing labels of man or woman or gay or straight. So even though you said there are queer academics and historians trying to accurately build an account of queer history, we won't really ever have a completely accurate understanding. Unfortunately not, but it's important to remember history is happening right now. Whatever we accomplish for queer liberation will be recorded and documented thanks to the internet and digital media. I mean, for all I know, this very video could be playing in some future classroom during their LGBTQ history unit as a primary source from the 2020s. Hi, future students! I think we got a bit off track from planning your pride party. It's okay, I gotta completely start over anyways now that you've shattered my entire queer worldview. Hey, as long as you leave room for people to pee on each other, it'll be a great party. Do gay people pee on each other?